Well, good evening, members of the committee, and thank you for turning up on this extraordinarily hot evening. I took the unilateral decision not to put a tie on tonight, so please forgive me for that, but I just decided it was just over warm. Right, there are no fire drills planned this evening. If the fire alarm is activated, which is a continuous siren with a flashing red light, please leave the building immediately following the fire exit signs. Phil, do I have any apologies for absence and substitutions?
Thank you, Chairman. We've had apologies for absence from Councillor Ball, Councillor Barker, Councillor Granville, Councillor Solander, and we've had substitutions for Councillor Horwood, which is Councillor Williams, and Councillor Thornton, which is Councillor Haslam.
Thank you. I've never seen anyone move so fast, Councillor Clark. I really haven't, but...
See me on the dance floor.
Okay. So item 1 on our agenda this evening is to approve the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 18th of June 2026 as a correct record. Is it your wish that I sign them as a correct record for that meeting? Any against? Any abstentions? 1. Because you weren't present at the meeting. In which case there are 2 abstentions because I wasn't present at the meeting either. So those minutes are approved for the future. Item 2, declarations of interest or predetermination, including any that are not already registered. Councillor Haslam.
As I'm substituting for Councillor Thornton, I have to declare that I am the Chairman of Seal Parish Council and the Planning Committee at Seal Parish, but I come with an open mind and without predetermination.
Thank you. Do we have any others? Councillor Marshall.
Yes, I am a ward member with Councillor Grint. When he comes up, I remain undecided.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of lobbying? Okay, do we have anyone who has not been lobbied? Councillor Williams, 1. So were we lobbied on 4.1? Yep. 4.2? 1 was, Councillor Shea was, okay. And 4.3? Okay, thank you. Did you get all those, Phil? Thank you. In which case, let's get on with the meat and drink of tonight, which is our first item, 4.1, which I'm going to ask Summer to present to the committee, please.
Great, thank you very much. Good evening. This application at 22 Shoreham Lane seeks permission for the removal of chimney, conversion of existing garage, demolition of rear extensions, part first floor side extension, loft conversion, solar panels, new garage and new garden room. Alterations to fenestration and associated landscaping is also proposed. This drawing shows a site location plan which identifies the site application in red. Oh, sorry, can you hear me better now? The site location, this shows the site location plan. In red is the application sites. This shows the existing site layout plan. And this is the proposed, where you'll see the front garage proposed, rear extension and garden room to the rear. This shows the existing and proposed sections. And here the existing plans and elevations. And here is the proposed elevations, where you'll note the dormers. Here shows the proposed floor plans, where you can clearly see where the rear is extending from. And here are the proposed plans and elevations for the garage to the front and the garden outbuilding. This photo shows the rear elevation as stood within the site. Then turned around, standing looking at the rear garden. This photo shows the relationship between the site and number 24. And then this photo is taken from standing within number 24's conservatory. This photo is stood within the application site looking back at number 20. And this photo is taken standing within number 24's rear garden looking back upon all the dwellings. Here is a photo of the front elevation and a wider view of the front elevation. And here I've included some examples of dormers which are within close proximity to the site. The full planning assessment and recommendation are set out in the committee papers and the late observations. In addition to this, one further objection was received following the publication of late obs. This further representation reiterates the previous refusal case that was put forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Summer. I'd now like to invite Caroline Davis to come down to the front, please, and address the committee. When you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
Members, I speak as a 25-year resident of Shoreham Lane. Shoreham Lane is an old rural lane with no pavements. The houses are all set back from the front gardens, the trees, hedges and open frontage. There's front garden amenity and rear garden amenity. There's boundary openness and rural lane character, all part of the character baseline recorded in SDC's own SRCAA/FO7 character evidence. This application breaks the character baseline and fails basic planning control in multiple ways. I will address 3. Failure 1 is the frontage. Slide 1 and slide 2 show SDC's own SRACC baseline, rural enclosed historic lane, no pavement, garden boundaries with trees and hedges. Front and rear gardens are not development capacity simply because they exist. Open frontage, vegetation, green gaps and boundary openness. The existing garage is relabeled as a games and kit store. A double garage stroke carport is being exported to the highway edge in the public street scene. This is manufactured frontage harm. It ruptures the street scene. The hedge retention is not a planning answer. It cannot make highway edge built form compatible with an open frontage rural lane. This breaks SDC's own character baseline. Shoreham Lane's character will be permanently eroded. Failure 2, the rear line. Slide 3 shows the control failure, frontage control broken, rear line control abandoned, rear boundary controls failed. One site-wide planning control failure. The rebuilt dwelling mass is shifted materially beyond every established rear line relationship. That rear line breach is loaded at every level with a 2-story mass, new 3rd habitable level, large rear dormers over present rear garden space, 3 large rear bays, all beyond every rear building line of the lane, in direct conflict with SDC's own extension guidance. All are carried beyond the broken rear control. The result is dominance, enclosure, loss of openness, reduced sky visibility, an overbearing impact, a walling effect, broken rear building lines, broken planning control, and direct amenity harm. Failure 3, site-wide over-extraction. Up to 60% built form increase has been loaded onto this constrained plot. Multiple built form structures run from the highway edge to the rear boundary, loading almost 50% of number 24's highway to rear boundary run. 26 meters of permanent brick and built form enclosure. This is an abnormal repeated bounding load. Rear and flank boundaries are loaded with a gym stroke office multi-room building and hard surfacing. This breaks the character
You
baseline.
have 30 seconds.
The open frontage, front and rear garden amenity, trees, boundary openness, the rural lane character, all are broken. The site stripping confirms the same false capacity assertion. The plot is incapable of carrying the load. This is why it has never been explained and no planning case can carry this. It
Thank
is
you,
a
that's
site-wide
fine.
over extraction. This application should be refused.
Thank you. I'd now like to call upon Pete Hadley, please, to speak for the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, councillors.
You have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, sir. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicants who are looking to restore and enhance 22 Shoreham Lane to make it their family home. My clients love the character of the existing house and the plans have been prepared to preserve this. The desire is to upgrade and extend the house whilst ensuring the privacy and amenity of neighbouring properties is not compromised. You will see the design retains the front elevation of the house in its current form, although 2 small dormers are to be introduced on the front roof slope. As your officers confirmed and have shown tonight, there are a number of properties in the area that are served by similar traditional small dormer features. The application has been called into committee by the ward councillor on the grounds of overdevelopment and impact on neighbours. And Riverhead Parish Council have objected particularly to the width of the house. However, unlike many other properties in the road, the existing house has not been extended in the past and is capable of accommodating the proposed extension works. The plans propose no increase in the width of the current house. There would be no reduction in the gaps between the existing house and neighbouring homes. The spatial standards of the road would be preserved. The proposed works are confined to the rear and through the provision of a loft conversion. As the committee report explains, the rear extension would extend 2.9 metres to the rear of the existing house. This is not excessive for a detached home that hasn't been extended before. In addition, as you will see from the site plan provided, this addition would not project unacceptably beyond the rear wall of either neighbouring property. And I would ask members and officers to look at the plans, not the illustrative provided by the third party, which I will question the accuracy of. The resultant scale of the house would in no way appear out of keeping with the scale of other homes in the road. Complaints have been made suggesting that development would be harmful to the neighbours. In fact, I think in this case, I think the number of complaints submitted by an individual resident has been somewhat vociferous. I know in the latest objections, they've been particularly critical of the officers, and I would object to that and question that. I think officers have assessed this application consistently with policy and thoroughly against the terms of policy. No windows are proposed that would overlook either neighbouring home. No flank-facing habitable windows on either neighbouring property would be impacted. The rear extension would not come close to either neighbouring home, and the rear extension would not project beyond the neighbour's rear building lines, but project substantially beyond the neighbour's rear building lines. The works would not therefore be overbearing, nor would daylight or sunlight be compromised. Complaints have been raised regarding the proposed flat roof detached garage carport and the garden room outbuilding. As the report confirms, the garage would not be visible from the street scene. You've seen a photograph of the hedge tonight. Given the existence of the mature hedge running along the front flank boundaries number 24, there is ample room for this to be introduced, and your officers recommend a condition requiring the hedge to be retained. The applicant would happily accept such a condition as they want to keep the hedge. The small single-storey garden room building in the rear garden is modest, and this feature could be introduced as permitted
30
development.
seconds, sir.
Thank you, sir. Many similar outbuildings serve neighbouring properties and similarly serve homes throughout the district. Taking these factors into account, I'd ask you to support the recommendation before you to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clack, are you speaking to this one? Okay, because it's not on my list, but that's fine. You organised?
Right. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Just for transparency's sake, I live off Shoreham Lane, although a couple hundred metres or yards, sorry, from the house. But I'm obviously a local councillor. You'll hopefully see from the extract, I sent the residential extensions document to you all. You may not have seen it, but hopefully you did, in relation to the proposed garage. This document is important because it gives the full context of our planning policy in relation to garages in front of the building line. And sorry to say, the papers in front of you don't give you the full context of that document, because this is the full context. 4.49 says garages should be smaller in scale and clearly ancillary to the property. If you look at the plan, it goes right from the very front, right up to the house with the carport, or pretty much so. 4.50 says in order to appear ancillary to the property, it must fit in with the street scene and should be of a scale and form that fits in unobtrusively with the building and street scene. This will be the only garage in front of any house in this street, and it will be the only large structure of any kind in a front garden on this street. And I'll come back to unobtrusive. When 4.51 of the residential extensions document says garages should not generally be located in front of the building line. This drawing shows, with a big cross, a garage just poking out a little way from the building, attached to the building, poking out a little way. This, of course, is a completely separate building. So, so the existing attached garage, which is there, is now being allocated for other purposes to justify building this large garage some distance in front of the house. 4.52 of the document says garages being in front, particular care will be taken when garages or outbuildings are set in front of the building in view of the likely greater impact on the street scene. But then also look at the summary on this document. Garages or outbuildings set in front of the building line would not normally be allowed. That's the full context of garages, of the garage being in front. And paragraph 26 in the report talks about this being a relatively modest footprint. I mean, this is a double garage. It's not a single garage. It stretches when you look from the front to the house. So that isn't modest. And going back to unobtrusive, how is that unobtrusive? So, and then just finally, to return to 4.49, garages should be smaller in scale and clearly ancillary to the property. How can a double garage fall into this? As I say, it stretches from the front to the back. I'll just say quickly on my picture here, luckily no one was sunbathing despite the weather. This is from, see, and what that building line doesn't give you the context is that these houses have got single stories extensions. No one's been,
30 seconds, Graham.
no one has tried to build a double story extension that overshadows their neighbours. Everyone else has gone for single story. And yet this is double story. So it's not, you can't just look at well, I would suggest you can't look at the drawing on the plan and think, oh, it's in line with the other buildings, because the others are single story extensions. So this will definitely be overbearing. And I would ask you to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
4 minutes on the dot.
I don't know, in the situation where we can offer questions of clarity to the speakers first. So who'd like to kick off, if anybody? Councillor Cole.
Chair, thank you. And thank you to the speakers who have given their addresses. Just for clarity, in relation to, I think it was Councillor Clack who spoke last, suggested that the double garage extended from where it is shown on the map right up almost to the front of the house. On a phone or a tablet, the images are quite small. Can we confirm that there's sort of a double garage and the bit next to it that looks perhaps like the canopy or something is
Councillor Cole, are
actually,
you asking the officer or the speaker?
sorry, the officer.
Yeah, the officer's questions come after the questions to the speakers.
I do apologize, in which I will reword my question slightly to,
Or hold it till the questions of the officers, whichever you
in which
prefer.
I will hold it for the officer. Thank you.
Fine, thank you. Are there any other questions of the speakers? No. Okay, in which case, Councillor Clack, you've held on. Oh, sorry, did you want to? Right, okay. In which case, Councillor Clack, you've got your chance to question the officer now, because it's the opportunity.
Thank you. Hopefully the officer has sort of remembered where I got to in my question. I'm just questioning whether from the mapping, what at first glance may appear to be a large building, is it correct that actually there's the garage up near the front hedge line, and then the next part isn't actually garage, it's grass, an area grass, and then the next bit is some kind of herbaceous border or something. So that's not the extent of the intended garage.
Yes, that's correct. It does appear a bit misleading on the site plan, but it is just a grass verge beside it. The first part that is labelled garage is the garage.
Just for clarification, the drawings do say grass, it's garage, grass, and then in effect a border area, and then the actual house.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Is that answered your question?
It does. I have a couple of other questions, but I'll quite happily listen to my colleagues, any questions they may have, and at your discretion, come back with a few questions
You'd be
later.
welcome to come back if they're not answered by one of the other questions. So who do I have next? Councillor Camp, I think.
Thank you. Yes, I'd just like to understand more, please, about the building lines that were mentioned, because it was very clear from the photograph that the building lines on this one have not been respected, if that's the right word. So I'm just trying to understand a bit more of your thought process there. Also, along with the garage, it appears to be the only one that's in the front. And it does very much reduce the openness, and it is actually just right up to the boundary. So I'm really wanting to understand your thought process there, because it's the only one. The others aren't like that.
Okay, if I pick up the rear stuff, I mean, in terms of the rear properties, a number of properties have been extended. I think, as points out, the majority of those are single story. Sorry, a bit closer to the mic today. Yes, so the ones to the rear are single story. We don't have a planning policy that says you can't extend your property to the rear, and actually lots of works can actually be carried out to a property as permitted development. For example, a property here that could add a 4-metre rear extension at single story without needing a planning application, if it's a detached property. So there isn't a defined policy that says thou shalt not cross this rear line. Our guidance, our supplementary planning guidance, which I know has been referred to, talks about a 4-metre deep rear boundary, or being a guide of that's how far we should go back. That guidance was written in 2009, prior to was around about the time the permitted development rights changed. And so in effect, we used to look at volumes rather than distances. So around that time, in effect, that policy is written on the basis that you can only do anything that is PD, you can do. Anything beyond that requires a planning application. So we're having to assess those. So we've got ultimately, to the rear properties, they can be extended at the rear. Majority of times without needing a planning application. We've had a series of planning applications on the sites. So in terms of there isn't a definitive policy that says you can't extend your property to the rear. There's guidance that says recommend it shouldn't go any further than 4 metres, but that is guidance in the supplementary planning guidance. The actual policies themselves, EM1 doesn't specify a maximum distance. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. That's explained very well on the back. But what about the front and the garage right up? And it's the only one. And when we see that picture, it's the only garage that's going to be there.
Yeah, it is the only front garage or outbuilding forward of the principal elevation. I think what's really important is that what has been referred to is guidance, not policy, and it is open to judgment. The guidance specifically mentions normally and generally, therefore meaning it is open to assessment. In this case, the garage, yes, is close to the boundary, but would not be visible. There's, as you would have seen on my photo, I'll just get it up quickly. Yeah, a very tall boundary hedge, which would screen it entirely as it's a flat roof. So I think the question is whether it's actually harmful. And we obviously said it's not.
Okay. Thank you. And the hedge is conditioned, isn't it, to be there? Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
that's great. Just sort of follow, just to clarify, the policy or the guidance in the SPD is that shall not normally be in front of the front building line. It doesn't say all applications should be refused for front extent or garages in the front garden. There's clearly going to be some cases which, if the application before us was for like a 4 metre high pitch roof garage or even 5 metre. Sorry, I'm going all over the shops now. Before it be in front of the property, but we've got an application here which is for a sort of 35 square metre garage with a flat roof which is about 2.4, 2.7 metres high, and it's a hedge which is about 3 metres in height from the highway, which in effect will screen the garage, which is why in this particular case we've taken a view that it's not harmful. It's our interpretation. The application before members is for you to consider whether you agree with that recommendation or not. That's really for you to make that judgment. But from our opinion, we're of the view that that garage isn't going to be harmful, except in that we don't normally, but this is a case where we think it could be allowed or should be allowed. Okay.
Aaron, sorry, you rattled through some dimensions. I'm not good with verbal dimensions. And I think one of the speakers mentioned that the garage is double height. Could you?
No, it's single story. It's a double garage, but it's single story, 2.6 meters in height.
Was that enough clarity on the dimensions? Yep. Okay. Councillor Malone.
Thank you, Chair. Aaron, you've mentioned the hedge, and we can see on this photo the hedge to the right as we look, and the hedge in front. Looking at the block plan on page 43, it's not quite clear whose land the hedge to the left sits on. Could you clarify that? Yeah, the hedge between 24 and 22.
It is within the site, within the red line boundary.
Well, if there are no further questions of the officer, I'll come back to Councillor Perry Cole, who had some supplementaries he wanted to ask.
Chair, I'm very grateful. Thank you. And at the risk of sounding pedantic, and I'm grateful that we've already considered, or the officers have considered conditioning, that should this be approved this evening, that officers have considered conditioning the hedge. But originally it was referred to as this hedge, and on the supplemental papers, it's called the existing front hedge. Now, in law, that you could read into that in two ways. So my concern would be, should that hedge suddenly suffer from blight or whatever and just disappear or need to be cut down, we would then lose the screening, which is not what the proposition of the condition would be. So is it possible that the condition could be reworded to suggest that it's necessary to maintain some form of screening, possibly natural screening? So just taking that element of doubt away from the existing front hedge. So if it's cut down or removed or dies, then it'll have to be replaced so that over time a new hedge would grow to cover up the screening aspect. Would that be possible?
We could condition a replacement hedge, I believe. I would note that it has been specified within the wording of the condition that it is the hedge on the western boundary. So the matter of which hedge it is should be clear.
I mean, if members require some sort of clarification in terms of hedges, and the landscaping scheme requires further details to be included. One will be the retention of the hedge, or the boundary hedges, and any additional planting. And if in effect those hedges die back, then the condition requires them to be replaced within a 5-year period. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So it wasn't the hedge I was going to, it's just, are we talking about this specific hedge at this moment in time, or are we talking about sort of in perpetuity? But Aaron, thank you, you've clarified that. And just one further question, if I may, Chair. So para 22, dwellings along Shoreham Lane are predominantly 2-storey. So those that are not 2-storey, are there any other 3-storey properties, or are we talking about bungalows? And in which case, if this is a standalone development or changing, into a 3-storey property, how does that fit in with the character of the area?
It's my understanding that all of the dwellings along Shoreham Lane are 2-storey. Obviously, this does include a loft conversion with dormers. It doesn't necessarily create a 3rd storey in terms of how it's viewed from the street. In fact, as we've pointed out, there are a lot of dormers as existing in the area, which it would look quite similar to. So in regards to how it would appear within the street, it would look similar and acceptable, in my opinion.
Okay, so with one of the photographs that you put up, which I think was the road opposite, do you look at the area in its entirety to assess the character, or do you look at Glebe Field with its own sort of characteristics and then look at Shoreham Lane? Because obviously that they've been built at different times, etc. How do you differentiate? Where do you draw the line between a characteristic?
Sorry. Yes. So predominantly it would be considering the dwellings along Shoreham Lane. Some consideration has obviously been given to Glebe Field as well, being in the Riverhead Conservation Area. So as part of that assessment, and obviously it's in quite close proximity. The photo here, the bottom one, is of that directly opposite. So yes, obviously of the immediate vicinity.
Thank you all. Councillor Haslam, you have a question.
Yes, I have a question, please. As I understand it, number 22 Shoreham Lane is in the urban confines. So does the principle of overdevelopment apply in this area as it's not in the conservation area?
The principle of overdevelopment isn't exclusive to the conservation area. In this case, it was considered not to be overdevelopment. Whether or not it's in a conservation area isn't necessarily relevant to that. If I've understood correctly, sorry.
My question's coming from a slightly different angle because I heard the speakers talk about overdevelopment and the parish council's comments were about overdevelopment of the site. But if it's within the urban confines, as I've seen in other applications, sometimes that doesn't apply within certain built areas. And that was my question.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. I mean, I think when we're in the green belt, we talk about a 50% increase in size of properties. When we're in urban areas, there isn't a defined figure as such. So we have to judge each individual application on its own individual merits and decide whether it's going to have an adverse impact, whether it results in overdevelopment of a plot. And with this application, I mean, I think as it's already been referred to, and obviously from the photographs, this property hasn't been extended before to the rear. So essentially, it's very difficult to argue that this property results in overdevelopment when it's never actually been redeveloped in terms of a rear extension before. And you have to look at the size of the plots. We don't look at, if we had an application which took over 50, 60% of the whole building plot from the rear garden to the front garden, we would probably saying that's going to be overdevelopment. I don't think we certainly haven't got a case such as that in this instance. The extension doesn't extend to the sides. It's no closer to the neighbouring properties. It's a 2.9 metres further to the deeper. And then obviously some alterations at the front in terms of fenestration, the dormers, and then the front garage. And that is the, in effect, extent works, and obviously the outbuilding in the rear garden. But in terms of totality, I certainly don't see this as being overdevelopment by any shape or form.
Thank you, Councillor Hassan. If there are no further questions, then I open the matter for debate. We are now formally in debate, and the matter is as per the recommendation before you to approve this application. Don't all rush at once. Councillor Camp.
Yes, I think it's quite a large extension to the front and the back, and I appreciate that it hasn't been done on a lot of houses. But I'm listening to the officer, and I'm listening that the overdevelopment is not such a big issue in this area. I'm listening to the building line at the back. I'm listening to the garage being having the mitigating hedge put there, conditioned. And the premise is always in favour of development. So I'm struggling to find reasons to refuse this properly that will stand up on appeal. I'm happy to listen to debate, but I'm tending to hedge towards what the officer's recommendation is, but I will listen to my colleagues.
Thank you. Councillor Shay, you have a finger in the air?
Tentatively, yes. I'm a little surprised to find this has come to us this evening, if I'm honest. The parish expressed concerns about overdevelopment, particularly on the width of the property. The width isn't changing. And very little change to the depth. The upper floor extensions are contained within the existing footprint. So that concern around overdevelopment is one I don't recognise. The unusual feature, I think, that is and has been worthy of consideration and has clearly given us all pause for thought is about that garage at the front. It's a lane I know very well. I'm quite impressed that the officer managed to get a photo of the frontage from as far back as they did, because it is very narrow and very verdant. And you can't see the houses behind the hedges as far as I'm concerned as a local resident. And so I understand that it is new and it is different, but I understand the point coming from officers that there is a lack of harm from allowing this garage to go ahead, because I don't think it will be visible, with the exception, of course, from the upper windows of immediately neighbouring properties. But from the lane, from the street scene, it will disappear behind that hedge. And if we've got the conditions there that protect that hedge and its future, then I think the street scene is well protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shay. If there are no more comments, then I shall put the matter to the vote as per the officer's recommendation in front of you, including, sorry, three people are saying the same thing to me, I think, including the late observations. Yes.
The landscape.
Yeah.
Regarding both hedges.
Right, yeah. The late observations and the extra condition on the hedging.
Reworded.
All right, the rewording of the condition on the hedging, and the recommendation is that planning permission be granted. All those in favour, please show. And are there any against? That motion is carried. We now have item 4.2. And before you go, thank you, Summer. Right, we are now on item 4.2, which is in the capable hands of Abby, and I'm going to ask her to present it to us, please.
Good evening, members. This is an application for the erection of a stable block. This is the site location plan. You will see here it's quite a small red line compared to a wider blue line area. This is the existing block plan. You can just sort of see vaguely on here, this is sort of like indicating the existing sort of access area. This is the proposed block plan, which shows the proposed hedging that would go around here, the stable block here, and it's an indicative location of a manure trailer. These are the plans and elevations of the stable buildings. So you can see it's approximately 7 meters by 3.5 meters, and a fairly modest height. So this is a photo taken from the road looking north towards the access. This is taken from sort of the access area looking towards the proposed location of the stables. This is a photo showing sort of the front boundary treatment even in March, before the front hedge was in full greenery. This is a photo of that boundary taken this week. This is a photo looking west towards the existing dwellings and sort of the fields sort of this way to the north. And again, this is a photo just looking that west direction, but taken from the access. This is just a site photo taken from the road looking eastwards. And this is just another photo just showing the sort of access in a bit more context with the fields behind and the start of that front boundary treatment. Yeah, and my full planning assessment is set out within the committee papers and late obs.
Thank you, Abby. Before I invite the speakers up to come and talk to us, it's worth noting that this application, we're looking at it this evening, not with a view to actually granting permission, but with a view to how we would have granted it had it been in front of us before we got it. That is to say, it ran out of time in its process, and we now have to basically create a recommendation that says what we would have done. So just bear that in mind when you're listening to the speakers and in your questioning. I have a speaker. Number one will be Miles Hayard, I think, please. So when you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
I have lived in Underriver for over 20 years and I'm currently chairman of the Underriver Village Association, but I'm here representing the neighbours and concerned residents. We have the slide of the view of the National Trust area. Slide 2, please, as well, where it shows the site. This is an exceptional setting within a national landscape, highly valued by residents and visitors, but under pressure for development. As the planning history shows, it has numerous owners, many of whom have paid well above agricultural value. On this site alone, in the last 10 years, 4 planning applications have been refused and 2 appeals dismissed because of the harm to the greenbelt, landscape and amenity. During each of these applications, between 12 and 25 local objections have been submitted, demonstrating the concern for future developments. Neither the applicant nor the officer's report considered the most recent appeal decision of the land, which was the change of use to dog walking and recreational field. This appeal was dismissed. Even though the provisional involved no buildings, the inspector concluded that the special qualities of the site would be significantly eroded and landscape and scenic beauty of this part of the national landscape would therefore not be conserved. I attach great weight to this matter in case. It would therefore be at odds with this application that includes buildings. Why would the officer go against the strong wording in the inspector? Slide 3, please, shows a very different site. This is in February 2026 with a severe degradation of the land proposed on the site. It is simply not a planning application for 2 stables. The lawful use of the application site and pasture is agricultural. No consent has been granted for keeping horses on the land which has no water or power supply. The applicant wants the stables because there's no shelter or storage on the site. During both cold and hot weather, many of the ponies have to be transported off-site. Therefore, the reason for this application is animal welfare. Last year, 12 ponies were kept on this land, requiring increased deliveries of food and water, resulting in severe overgrazing. The report to this committee states the application is on the basis of stabling 2 horses at a time, but this does not address how the land has been used. The ponies are not evidently used for sport, recreation, nor are they shod, ridden, or exercised or schooled. Keeping 12 crossbred ponies on 7.5 acres suggests a commercial use such as breeding or animal refuge. We also find it at odds that the applicant, who is not local, lives over 20 miles away, attempts to sustain these animals with food and water brought to the site. The applicant is not the registered owner according to Land Registry of May 25, unless there is a delay with registration. We'd like confirmation that the applicant is the current legal owner. There is no adequate access to parking or yard area on the site, and visitors are parked in the lane. The applicant says that hard standing is intentionally omitted, but without provision for parking, the intended use cannot function and the application is incomplete. Hard standing has already been refused on previous applications.
You have 30 seconds, sir.
The officer concludes that because the stables is small and partly screened, it preserves openness. However, openness is more about visibility. It includes a permanent building in an open field, changes the character of the site and contributes to the gradual domestication of the countryside. The parish council and residents have consistently raised concerns about the landscape impact, absence of services, drainage, highway issues, and cumulative effect on further development. Those concerns were very valid, and I therefore respectfully ask members to reject the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
We're now going to call Rob Jarman, please, who's speaking for the application.
Good evening.
3 minutes when you're ready, sir.
Thank you. Yes, we agree with the case officer's report, plus the urgent update. We think it's a very comprehensive report. We agree with the conditions. They all seem reasonable. I'd just like to highlight paragraphs 43 and 44 of the report, where I think the main objection or potential objection to this is, does it harm the openness of the metropolitan green belt? And because of its sheer small size, it's less than 25 square meters, I don't think it's unusual to see stables or much bigger scale buildings in the countryside, such as polytunnels, large agricultural barns, most of which can be erected without the need for planning permission under agricultural permitted development rights. So I don't see openness as being able to be maintained, because one can, especially if you're a farmer, you can do lots of things without the need for planning permission at all. The speaker, one of the reasons he quoted for being against this was referring to appeals. Well, obviously this isn't for a dog exercising area, it's for stables. The stable block that was refused under the 2014 reference was much larger than what's proposed. It was in a different location as well. We've been very careful in terms of the size of this. It's for ponies, cob ponies. And secondly, we've chosen the location because, as the case officer said, it's next to the gates. There's a backdrop of trees forming quite a good boundary to the east. There's a hedge along Under River House Road. And what we're proposing as well is further enhancing the screening of the stable block with 2 rows of double staggered native hedging.
30 seconds, sir.
Nothing else to say. Thank you.
Thank you. You could have had your full 30 seconds, but that's fine. Thank you very much indeed, sir. The town representative now, please. Councillor Fetters-Neame, is it? If I pronounced that right. And you two have 3 minutes whenever you're ready. Would you like to turn your microphone on?
You're starting me again, please. 3 minutes. Chairman, members, the Parish Council maintains its objection to this application on the following 4 grounds: inappropriate development in the Greenbelt and loss of openness, failure to conserve and enhance the national landscape, building not designed to a high quality, failure to provide satisfactory means of access for vehicles and pedestrians, nor to provide adequate parking. Mr. Hayward has shown that this is an exceptionally sensitive site within the national landscape, where 4 planning applications have been refused and 2 appeals dismissed because of harm to openness, landscape and amenity. Indeed, the 2022 dismissal of an application with no buildings include the inspector's view that the special qualities of the site needed to be conserved. Slide 1, please. Openness of the green belt. The current proposal for stables at Site B may be slightly smaller than those refused in 2014 at Site A, but it positions them more prominently and also includes an open trailer for manure storage. We suggest that the proposal would not, therefore, conserve and enhance the national landscape and would belie the inspector's 2022 emphasis on its scenic beauty. Also, note that previous applications have been for the whole pasture, whereas the current red line is confined to the access area. Planning conditions would apply only to that small part of the land unless specified otherwise. Slide 2, please. This image shows the sketch plans submitted and the materials. There is insufficient detail in order to be clear about their quality of design and materials and final appearance, and they are therefore not a sound basis for the planning condition proposed. Slide 3. The application fails to provide for satisfactory access for vehicles and pedestrians, nor is there adequate parking. Hardcore was removed from the site following enforcement action, and the proposed planning does not allow for all-weather access. The applicant explains the reason for the application is animal welfare. However, all-weather surfaces and additional storage and shelter will be needed to achieve this. The Parish Council asks that this committee refuse the application.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Councillor Grint. He's reading a statement from the local member, Councillor Thornton, who unfortunately is unavoidably detained this evening.
Committee members, you're to imagine this is Julia sitting here. So I'm reading what Julia had to say. Chairman, members, I had intended to address you in person this evening, but unfortunately I had pretty substantial surgery yesterday and I'm not in a position to attend this evening. I'm grateful to Councillor Grint for agreeing to read out this statement on my behalf. As the ward councillor, I urge you to refuse this application. This is not simply an application for 2 modest stables. It is yet another proposal on one of the most sensitive and vulnerable sites in Seal Parish, a site with a long and consistent planning history. Over many years, Sevenoaks District Council has repeatedly defended this landscape. Multiple applications have been refused and planning inspectors have dismissed successive appeals because of the harm the development would cause to the openness of the Greenbelt, the national landscape and the rural character of this location. Most significantly, the most recent appeal on this land was dismissed even though it involved no built development at all. The inspector concluded that the proposal would significantly erode the special qualities of the site and that the landscape and scenic beauty of this part of the national landscape would not be conserved. The inspector attached great weight to that harm. That decision should carry considerable weight today. The officer's report suggests that these stables are acceptable because they are smaller and located nearer the road than previous proposals. I respectfully disagree. A building does not become acceptable simply because it is moved a few meters closer to the highway. If anything, Placing built form closer to that single carriageway, country lane, makes it far more visible in the public realm and more intrusive within this open landscape. The fundamental issue identified by previous inspectors remains unchanged. This is an isolated structure within an exceptionally sensitive greenbelt and national landscape setting. Members should also consider whether the proposal genuinely falls within the exception for appropriate development in paragraph 154 of the National Planning Policy Framework. That exception relates to facilities for outdoor sport, outdoor recreation, or cemeteries. The evidence before you does not demonstrate that this land is being used for outdoor sport or recreation. The supporting statement explains that the purpose of the building is shelter and welfare for ponies because they have to be transported elsewhere during adverse weather. There is little evidence of equestrian recreation taking place from this site. If the use is not genuinely connected with outdoor sport or recreation, then this proposal should not benefit from the Green Belt exception and should instead be regarded as inappropriate development. Even if members were to conclude otherwise, the proposal still conflicts with Local Plan Policy EN 5 because it fails to conserve the natural beauty of the national landscape. It also raises concerns under Policy EN 1. The application intentionally omits hard standing, turning space, and operational areas, yet the site plainly requires vehicle access for feed, water, bedding, manure removal, and veterinary attendance. Without adequate facilities, the proposal is incomplete. And if those facilities are later required, they will inevitably increase the urbanizing impact on this countryside location. Finally, this committee should not overlook the cumulative planning history.
You have 30 seconds.
The site has been the subject of repeated applications seeking progressively more intensive forms of development. Members must determine today's application on its own merits, but they are also entitled to recognise that each incremental proposal risks eroding the very openness and landscape qualities that previous decisions have consistently sought to protect. For those reasons, I respectfully ask you to refuse planning permission because the proposal constitutes inappropriate development within the Green Belt, fails to conserve the national landscape. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Excuse me, it's now time to ask questions of the speakers, but unfortunately Councillor Grint is not in a position to be able to answer questions specifically because he was reading a statement from the local member who is not present. So we have to avoid asking him any questions, I'm afraid, this evening, but the others are open to your questioning, whichever you'd like to do. Councillor Camp.
Yes, I wanted to refer it's to the, yes, you sir, sorry, I forgot your name. Yes, sorry. The photograph where we saw the entrance was really, really poached up. And it really looks really unsightly. And there was a mention of hardcore having been removed and whatever. Could you just explain how you intend to deal with that? Because if you've got lorries coming in and out with, you know, IBCs of water and stuff like that, it's heavy.
Councillor Campion, I think you're addressing the wrong person. I think you need to be talking to the applicant.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Isn't?
Is it?
Oh, sorry, this gentleman. Sorry, I'm sorry, I muddled you both up.
Very good question.
Yeah, sorry. So I knew it was a gentleman. Forgive me.
Thanks. Yeah, the idea is obviously, particularly in winter time, the hard surfacing that's there at the moment gets covered in mud. So it's a matter of putting, like most farmers or equestrian owners, just put down more shingle to make up the hard surface. One of the main points about the application, obviously it's about animal welfare, but given the history, it's having the confidence to pay for water supply, drainage, electricity, because obviously you need all of those to look after horses.
It's your intention to put those supplies in?
To repair what's already, sorry, in terms of utilities, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
May I just ask a question? You mentioned that the mud is covering the hard standing that's there. Is there a hard standing there at present?
Yes. Well,
I'd like to ask the officer in that case then, if you don't mind.
When I've been on site, I have not seen any hard standing there. My understanding is that the application in front of us has no hard standing proposed, and there is no hard standing currently on site.
Thank you, Abby.
Yeah, follow-up question to Mr. Jarman, just picking up on your answer to my colleague's question. I think you said you were going to put in electricity and you're going to put in water and maybe more hard standing. Is that what I heard you say?
okay, certainly water and drainage, simply because horses need water to drink and you need to clean horses. So for obvious animal welfare reasons, yes, obviously that does not require planning permission. Secondly, if there is an issue to do with whether or not there's hard standing below the mud, then of course that can be the subject of a new planning application.
We had the answer about the hard standing. Sorry, the water and the electricity that you're talking about putting in, can you elaborate a bit more about that and explain why that isn't reflected in the current application, if that is your clear intention?
Well, as I said earlier, the applicant bought the land before 2014. And sorry.
He's not the registered owner.
What?
2025.
Can we just have one person answering a question at a time? Otherwise, we'll have several meetings running concurrently.
Sorry, can I continue?
Yes, please do.
So since the applicant has bought the land from the local farmer, as has been pointed out by objectors, there's been a history of refusals. So dare I say it in very real world terms, he's not going to pay for a connection for water supply or drainage until he's got the surety of a planning permission. Otherwise, it's wasted money.
That wasn't really my question. My question was, if there's a clear desire to connect electricity and connect water, why isn't that reflected in the application?
Because it doesn't require planning permission.
Can I just ask for clarity? I'm a little bit confused as to what the ownership of this piece of land actually is. Who actually owns? Is the person who is applying for this permission the owner of the land?
Yes, as per the planning application forms, yeah.
That's definite. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Williams, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, it's the same sort of question. Is he the registered owner? Could I ask the gentleman over there who he thinks a registered owner is?
Yeah, I have. Yes, I have the names of the registered owners in 2025 who bought the land on the title. The registered owners are not the current applicant. It is possible that the updating of the title, if there's been a change of ownership since May 2025, has not been recorded. That I can't confirm. But most certainly, the applicant was not the owner back in 2014, as the gentleman's suggesting.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Williams?
No, I don't know how we can proceed if we don't know who owns the land. But you know.
Well, I suppose I have to ask the question: is the ownership of the land pertinent to whether we grant or refuse permission for this?
It depends on the ownership of the red line. My understanding from the documents submitted and the red line and certificate A relates to, well, certificate A in the application form relates to the red line boundary. The blue line area, I think, is where some of the parish and the public comments have indicated there may be an area of contention. over the ownership, but the certificate A and the red line area is what we're determining the application on here. I can show, do you want me to pull up the site location plan?
Sorry. If I might, Mr. Chairman, I think one additional factor to bear in mind is that this council is not actually determining the application as a whole anyway. That question of validation would now be falling to the planning inspector to deal with. So it's perhaps dealt with best outside of this meeting, especially as we are absent some of the information anyway. And so members can perhaps focus on the question of the merits of the application.
Yeah, okay. That's the legal opinion, that we need to focus on the merits of the application, not the ownership of the site. Because, as I said at the opening remarks of this, we are actually saying what we would have done had we been asked to or brought to this committee in the first place. So let's confine our deliberations to the actual merits or otherwise of the application, if we may. Councillor Haslam.
So I have a number of questions. Just going back to the vehicle access, if you're looking at animal welfare and the number of ponies that are being kept on the field, why would you only have, if you've got, say, a dozen ponies, why would you only have 2 stables? That doesn't, the numbers don't work for me. I have other questions, but if we answer that question first, please.
Is that to the applicant?
Well, as I said before, it doesn't give one confidence in that everything's been refused. So you've already heard tonight that one of the main reasons for objection was that previously there were more stables proposed, but that wasn't good enough. So it's been reduced to, I'd say, a minimum size, because to be frank about it, 2 stables are better than nothing. And I think it's quite a serious point. Recently, a vet has been down there, and vets these days, they bring their laptops down. And because it's completely open, you can't see the laptop because it's completely open. So it's just for a lot of this is just for basic shelter reasons.
Councillor Haslam.
Yeah, so I mean, if you've got a laptop and you go in a car, you can go in your car and read a laptop. So you don't need a shelter to read a laptop. One of the being that I am of a farming family and I'm familiar with prior applications and the use of agricultural land, I'm trying to understand that as agricultural land is completely different from equestrian land, that's where prior approvals would stand. As this isn't being proposed to be used as agricultural land going forward, it's being used as equestrian land. That's why there's a planning application, as I understand it. Therefore, if it was being used as equestrian land, if a mobile shelter was used and that was provided, that in itself would not have required a planning approval. Only a fixed location would do. I'm confused with the language there. And just to correct the applicant, this is not just green belt, this is national landscape of, the previous inspector said that this was a specific special interest as well that needed to be maintained. I'm dubious and have to clarify that as there was enforcement action before to remove the hard standing, any other additional work over and above the application that we have in front of us would, as I understand it, require further applications. Please, can you confirm that?
Well, before you ask him to do that, can I just say that the difficulty that we've got here is that we're asking questions about why he's doing what he's doing, rather than is what he's doing the right thing to be, the thing that we need to make the decision on. In other words, we've got 2 stables that are sitting there in the corner of this field, and we have to decide whether, for reasons of whatever choice we've got, openness to the green belt or harm to the environment, whatever it might be, whether or not those actually are a proper development to put there. We can't decide for them what they might have done, could have done, should have done, or would have done. So I think I'd rather you didn't ask that question specifically, because yes, I agree with you. A mobile shelter would have not required planning consent, but we're not being asked to consider a mobile shelter. We're asked to consider a fixed double stable.
It does, but I was alluding to what the applicant said in being mindful of why they put their application in this particular term.
I understand the illusion, but please, we have to look at what we've got in front of us, not what we might think ought to be. So on that basis, are there any further questions of the speakers? In which case, if there aren't, I'll open questions to the officer. Councillor Camp.
Just a very small point. I see you've conditioned it to ponies under a certain size. How are you going to monitor that? How is that going to be monitored?
No, I mean, obviously ponies, there is a certain size, and I know Abby's been looking at sort of the definitions of what a... No, but it's, I think probably one thing it would be the size of the stables, and you'll be able to, I mean, if there's issues raised at the stable, well, ponies are bigger than they should be, then we would say they can't be kept in there. And there are existing horses and ponies on the site. These aren't the tallest of stables, so you wouldn't typically put a full size horse in there. It'd be because it wouldn't fit. So I think the whole idea is to have these smaller stables. They just have the cop ponies. I think for us in terms of enforcing, it would be pretty obvious when we went outside whether they were of a certain size. And I think we've got a condition which sort of specifies, what that would be. Well, that's a sort of we look at sort of like the slight minor there. Okay.
Councillor Shay.
Thank you. Could I seek some advice, please, from officers about how we deal with animal welfare through the planning system? Because representing an urban ward, it's not something I have to think about as often as others might. We haven't got water on this site, as I understand it. There's no electricity on the site, and access is looking like it might be weather dependent. So how do we treat those issues if for a site that's looking for permission to house animals, if there's any concern about being able to care for them well?
I mean, under LT2, we do have to have considerations to animal welfare, and that's with some of the considerations around stable sizing and grazing land, etc. And there's also, I can't remember the exact judgment, but there was case law and judgments last year which show that when we make a planning decision, we do have to at least have a consideration to animal welfare. On this site, there are already horses grazing, ponies grazing. They are already they already must be accessing this site for these horses. So the provision of the stable would allow better or more care in terms of the stabling in poor weather or veterinary care. But the issues that have been raised around access in terms of access and parking, I can't see that the provision of 2 stable buildings when there are already horses grazing on this site and are being moved on and off the site as existing is going to cause any additional access needs and things in that way, because those horses are already there, they're already grazing. The provision of the stables may improve their welfare, but it's not going to exacerbate that situation in terms of the access and the water issue. There's already no water, there's already no electricity. If these things don't necessarily need consent, but the provision of this building may improve the animal welfare in that sense, but it's the other impacts. I understand the concerns, but I can't see the provision is going to exacerbate the concerns about access, etc.
Yeah, I'm just going to follow up on that. Our policy LT2 covers equestrian development, and the only part that really talks about sort of what we require in terms of animal welfare is ensuring that there's sufficient grazing land and off-road riding areas That is essentially the policy requirement. And so that it doesn't go beyond that. I mean, we obviously ensure we've got appropriate size stables, which obviously we're restricting it to the size of horses that can actually stay within it. But we don't actually have a planning policy that says thou shall have water, thou shall have electricity. We do have a requirement to ensure that appropriate manure is sort of dealt with, and there's conditions requiring to ensure that there's not any runoff into the nearby streams or watercourses. So they're the bits that we can control, but we can't control some of the aspects I think that we've heard on and what you've just raised. So.
Thank you, Councillor Shay. Councillor Leyland.
Is there any sort of correlation between how many horses you got and how many stables you need? Because if you got lots of, I don't know, ponies, horses, and you got 2 stables, surely that's not good enough, is it?
There isn't a sort of requirement under the
So
application.
you can have as many ponies and horses on that piece of land as you want.
It's the application.
Do you mind? Do you mind? No, well, don't say. I'm speaking to an officer.
I know that.
Thank you. Sorry, carry on. Can you repeat what you said, please?
Yeah, what I was going to say is there isn't a policy that says if you've got 10 horses, you need 10 stables. It works the other way around in terms of if you've got stables, that you can only sort of, we don't sort of say that if there's 6 stables, then you have to ensure that there's sufficient land to serve 6 horses in terms of a grazing area. The applicant can have more horses, but that's we can't control that.
The blue line area at the moment is sort of the grazing area that's proposed. That grazing horses is still agricultural use, subject to, you know, sufficient additional feed and things like that. The area that would change to equestrian land would be the red line area, just for that clarification as well, when we're just talking about grazing area, just for that clarification.
It's my understanding that I think it's the British Horse Society and the RSPCA and other organisations do set down specified amounts of grazing per head of animal on the site. But unfortunately, as you've just heard from the officer, that isn't a planning consideration. That's animal welfare specific. And we're here to look at the actual planning application in front of us, which is to put 2 stables in where there are none.
Thank you.
Councillor Cole first, and then I have, yeah, I've got you little one sitting in the back there.
Chair, thank you. And we've heard reference within the documents to a mobile shelter, and indeed from one of the committee members, a mobile shelter, of which until I read these papers, I was blissfully unaware that such things existed. Would planning permission be required because of the location of this site for a mobile shelter? And if a mobile shelter were to be erected, could it stay up permanently, or would it be limited to X number of days per year or per month or something?
I mean, this application isn't for a mobile shelter, but to answer your question, a mobile shelter doesn't need planning permission if it's moved regularly. And that is if like a mobile shelter is on skids, for example. So if it's moved regularly, if a stable or a mobile shelter, even on skids, is located in one space for a long time, you know, it's not being moved, it's there for 3, 4, 5 months, we would say that's got a degree of permanence and would therefore need a planning application.
And can I just add to that, that this is not relevant to this debate because we're not debating a mobile shelter, we're debating a permanent twin stables and in the corner of the building, in the corner of the field. Councillor Purvis first, then Councillor Malone, then Councillor Haslam.
On the planning portal, there's a comment saying the structure is next to a stream. Effluent and runoff from the stables will flow directly into the stream, polluting the watercourse. And then, Aaron, you also mentioned pollution and runoff. So how relevant is all this to it?
I think we've got a condition already put in place, Councillor Purvis, to counteract that.
Yeah, Councillor Ray is right. There is a condition. I think it's condition 8. Yeah. It's condition 7, 5, 6. What have I done? I've done something. There's definitely a condition listed. I've not got the right. It's condition 5, according to Aaron. That deals with drainage and the manure store and ensuring that that's waterproof enough so that the manure store isn't leaking, etc.
Councillor Malone, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. I think I heard that previous applications have been and appeals have been declined by the planning inspector, even where there's been less development than the small amount that's proposed here, presumably because of the impact on the openness in the green belt, etc., etc. Can you explain to us again why you're comfortable with this application, notwithstanding previous inspectors having declined smaller proposals?
So there's been 4 applications that have been refused on this site, 2 of which have been tested at appeal. The first one was a larger stable building that was set further back into the site, and that was appealed in 2015. The inspector did raise some concerns about greenbelt and things, but one of their concerns, and they say it here specifically, they do talk about the fact that it is isolated, but they talk about that in the sense that in that respect, the building accommodating 3 stables would be a sizable structure of 7.3 metres by 8.5 metres, and it was taller, just as a point, which would be clearly visible from the access, even with some landscaping. But that's, in my view, being set back from the road would also accentuate its isolation in the wider landscape. And it's whereas I think this scheme is much smaller, it is closer to the road, and would be sufficiently screened now by the landscaping. I think given the elevated position and set back further from the road, it was just far more visible in that wider landscape. And it just was set back, further from the road in any sort of urban form. Whereas now I feel it's more discreetly relocated, in fact, it's not the right word, but it's more in a better location in that sense. Stable buildings are a normal and characteristic form of the rural countryside, and I don't think it's inappropriate or unusual to see an equestrian building, and this is a very modest, very small building in the Greenbelt and in National Landscape Views. In terms of the 2023 appeal, which I think is the one that people have referenced more recently with no buildings, the inspector found no harm to the openness in that one. Their concerns did relate to the character of area and national landscape, but they specifically talked about the fact that that was a commercial operation, the increased use of cars, and there'd be at regular intervals throughout the day, there'd be two cars at a time. This wouldn't be the case in this application. And they talked about the fact that in order, because it was for a dog walking site, that they'd need to have, by the very nature, you would need to have high fencing, that they didn't feel that a condition could overcome, because even just for the safety of the dogs, it'd be very hard to resist that higher fencing, even if the original application had said, you must come in for details of fencing, for example. And I think that's the difference. This sort of application, although you wouldn't have the level of cars, I think, like I said, equestrian buildings are normal and expected characteristic in a rural countryside. Equestrian development, by its very nature, is normally located in rural settings, and you wouldn't need additional fencing, etc. for the horses. It's not the same safety issues you'd have with nervous dogs, for example.
So Haslam, you were next.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm trying to, so I'm not going to make an assumption, I'm going to ask a question. In that condition 9 that is proposed is that the stable should be used for private equestrian purposes only and shall not be operated on a commercial basis at any time. How when you look at the slide that was shown by the parish council with regards to the access, and you look at the tyre treads that are in the ground, and also the proposal that there is a trailer there is used for waste for the collection of the farmyard manure. The tyre tracks there are of a very large tractor, which aren't normally used by anything else than a commercial operation. Obviously, we have the enforcement policies on that, but from what I can see there, this would indicate that there is already for operation going on there because of the size and use of the access by the vehicles.
The application before us is for private stabling. I mean, I think the photographs that Abby showed of the access, obviously doing different times of the year, you can see there's there isn't all those sort of time marks. We're looking at the application is just the small area to provide a stable. It doesn't, in terms of the wider land, the blue land, the applicant still owns that land and sort of accesses that land. All they're asking for under this application is for the stables. So that is what we're being asked to consider, not how they're operating. We would be saying just these stables themselves would be for private use only. And that's as far as we can go. We can put a condition on requiring it to be controlled. And as we always say, if we've got concerns over how a particular operation runs, we can impose conditions if that overcomes a concern. We shouldn't refuse applications if that matter can be addressed by imposing a condition, which is why we put a condition on to ensure that it is used for that private use only. If that comes to breach in the future, then that will be subject to enforcement, but we can't refuse an application on the basis of if, buts and maybes.
No, I understand that. And I'm working through as you answer, my next question was going to be about parking, because again, if the site is being accessed and there's going to be multiple people accessing the site, you clearly can't park a private vehicle in the winter months during that time, and there's no on-street parking because it's an unlit country road. I would have expected a provision of hard standing and parking to be provided with that. I know the applicant has partially addressed that, but within the application itself, there isn't, I'm just concerned that there isn't anything there, because I would have expected that to be there as part of this.
Are you actually asking a question, Councillor Haslam? Because I'm
Yes.
not quite sure what it is.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the application, there is the gates are set back, so naturally there's an area in front where a vehicle would stop and park. And if we're talking about this is for just two stables, you're not going to for private use only, and we're not expecting, because it's only private use only, that there's going to be multiple people there regularly on a day. It's a case of at present those horses are roaming across the existing land. Across the existing fields, so these are stables there, and we're not expecting that to increase. If it does, if a use changes, then that's something we can consider. But at present, what's being proposed in front of us and what we're being asked to consider is for this private use only, and we're conditioning it on that basis.
I do have one last point, and I'm just thinking through in my mind in looking at the amount of mud that was coming off the road in the winter months. I do, if I'm correct, believe that the district council are responsible for cleaning the roads. So if that access isn't provided, does that have an impact and additional cost on the council, which we should look to condition to make sure that that isn't the case, please?
The access exists already. It's not they're proposing a new access, which would be something we would potentially, if you create a new access, there's something we could consider in Kent Highways take a view. The cleaning of the roads, in terms of if there's mud on the public highway, that's a matter for Kent County Council rather than the district council. I mean, in terms of cleaning roads.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of the officer? Not, in which case I'm going to open the matter for debate as per your agenda papers and taking account of the late observations. So, we're now open for debate. Councillor Haslam, Councillor Camp.
I'll go first because I'm familiar with cob ponies because where I live in in Kemsing, which our neighbour in Otford has a collection of cob ponies. They're some of the hardiest ponies that you can get. They have 12 in 28 acres. They don't have electricity. They don't have stables. They don't have water because it comes through a stream, through a drain that's nearby, and they're fairly hardy. I'm looking at the photographs I've seen, and to be honest, I can't see that this is not. This alludes to me to be a commercial operation based on the vehicle imprints on the access drive. I can't. Yeah, there are no. The photographs that were taken, there were no small vehicles accessing it. They're all commercial vehicles. I am concerned with regards to the ownership, with regards to the applicant saying, the agent of the applicant saying it's been owned since 2016. And Mr. Hayward has said that the ownership changed, I think, in 2025. Whether the red line overlaps or not, it is unknown. But I personally am, based on its planning history, but based on how it's being used, I'm very nervous and minded to vote against this application.
Thank you. Councillor Camp, you were next, I think.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I agree with what my colleagues just said. Cobs are some of the hardiest that you will find, and they live out very, very well. And I know plenty of people that actually take water to fields, so that's quite common. But I do also believe that because there is no shelter for them, cobs do occasionally get sick, they occasionally do stupid things, and they need to be stabled or put inside for health reasons or vet reasons or whatever. So I think probably the commercial, if we're looking at saying those are commercial tires, they're probably from horse boxes where the horses are taken away because there is no shelter at the moment. So I think from animal welfare point of view, I can agree that the stables are necessary, they're modest. I will listen to the debate, but I'm hedging along the lines of what the officer is recommending.
Any more for any more? Yes.
I'm aware of the photograph that I believe, I don't know, it was a local resident put up right at the beginning, and I can't see how allowing any building at all on this area would do anything to enhance or conserve the national landscape. I agree that the hedging might screen it a little if you're down nearer the site, but certainly in terms of views of national landscape, it will be visible. And I can't see how it would in any way enhance or conserve the landscape. In fact, I believe it does do harm to the openness of the green belt.
Thank you, Councillor Hudson. Councillor Malone, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. I must say I'm very concerned about the comments that we heard from the applicant or the applicant's agent about future plans. I think there's a considerable thin end of the wedge risk here, albeit I recognise that we have to look at the proposal in front of us. And in that context, Councillor Hudson has just said exactly what I was going to say. I think that the first photo that we saw from Mr. Hayward of this vista was absolutely beautiful, and I think any development here would be undermining the openness and failing to conserve the quality of the environment. So unless I hear something that shifts my position at the moment, I'm minded to refuse, square brackets refuse, because I recognise the context of the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Leyland.
Just to say I concur with the last two speakers, absolutely. Thank you.
So basically, we're being asked to decide whether this is an appropriate development in the Greenbelt or not, really. But anyway, Councillor Cole, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. You've mentioned several times now that the question this evening is to sort of decide what we may have decided had it come to us before. And my thought going through my mind is whether an option had it come to us before, would have been to defer. There seems to be some concern amongst a number of members, perhaps, of the ownership of the land. What is our position? Were we, for example, to have granted permission only to find out that we've granted permission to someone who doesn't own the land? So without that information at the time, surely we would have asked for to be deferred, for that information to be bottomed out and to come back to us so we could form a decision.
I mean, theoretically, it sounds really stupid, but you can actually apply for planning permission on anybody's land, whether you own it or whether you don't. So that would not, in my opinion, have made any real ground for deferral at that point. I mean, I understand your reasoning, but I think it's not something that would hold water. Councillor Haslam.
So something else which just comes to my mind, if this was a prior approval for an agricultural barn, it would be expected that you would have made a proposal for roadside access and a track to and from the barn, or Aaron's shaking his head. That may we may differ on opinion on that based on some of the applications I've seen. However, I would also again, where I have seen roads that have been requested to be cleared, they've been the clearance has been made directly to Sevenoaks District Council's direct services rather than Kent County Council for some of the clearing of the roadside, not the gullies, because the gullies and the drainage is responsible for the Kent County Council, but the clearance and sweeping of the roads, as I understand it, is direct services. But I'm quite happy to agree that we may not agree on that point, but I'm concerned about the access to this if it was an agricultural building.
Okay. No more from any more, in which case then I'm going to put the matter before you as per the agenda papers and as taking account of the late observations. And please bear in mind that you're looking at this application, not what might have been somewhere else. So all those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. 2. Any again? Sorry, 3. Okay, any against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In which case the motion is lost. We are now talking to a new motion, or we need to be talking to a new motion to refuse the application, or to say that we would have refused it. Can I have a yes, Councillor Hudson?
I think that the reasons for this are inappropriate development of the green belt and national landscape and loss of openness, failure to conserve and enhance the national landscape, and to, although it's not part of the application, failure to provide satisfactory means of access for vehicles and pedestrians and provide adequate parking.
I'm not entirely sure about the access because there's already an existing access there, but the other two, Aaron, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's probably couple of things. I mean, in terms of the green belt, this is, in my mind, a small set of stables that are in the green belt where appropriate development allows for outdoor recreation buildings, which is, in my mind, would say is appropriate development. So I wouldn't move that as a ground of refusal. Members, what I've heard in the debate, have talked about the harm to the national landscape in terms of these buildings and in terms of its prominence of them and their sort of the visual impact on the wider landscape. So I think we could argue a reason for refusal under EN5 of the Sevenoaks Location and Development Management Plan. Linked to that is our policy LT2, which relates to equestrian uses and buildings, and within that policy it does make reference that developments should not harm the character of the landscape of the area in which it's situated. So I would have said that those two things tie up together. So I would have said those two would be two grounds, well, combined one reason as a ground of refusal, with referencing EN5 and LT2, if we had been in a position to determine if it wasn't for the non-determination appeal.
What about EN1 and paragraph 154 of the MPPF, with regards to the exception relates to outdoor sport and the recreation.
Ian, policy, when you reference to paragraph 154, that's to do with the green belt. That's my view, is that that wouldn't be a safe ground of refusal. And I'm the view that stables of that size, we regularly see as inspectors would say that that is appropriate form of development. I would veer you away from going down that ground of refusal.
Are you happy to take on board the two grounds that?
Sorry? One ground refusal to do with landscape harm, referencing policy EN5, which relates to national landscape, and then also cross-referencing it to LT2 to do with equestrian development in terms of the harm to landscape.
You happy with that, Councillor Haslam?
Yes.
Do you have a seconder?
Chairman, I'm very happy to second.
Councillor Hogarth, right. So the motion is now before you to refuse on the grounds that you just heard from Councillor Haslam, seconded by Councillor Hogarth. All those in favour of that motion, please.
Subject
to what?
Referral to Secretary of State.
Yes, indeed. Subject to referral to the Secretary of State.
Planning Inspector, sorry.
It depends. Yes. Okay. Subject to referral to the Planning Inspectorate. Okay. Any against? Right. We're there. Thank you very much for all of that. Thank you, Abby. I'm going to offer a 5-minute break for everybody. It's exactly 1:45 by my wristwatch, so at 10:02 can we all be back in for the last section? All who are coming back, please can we have you seated? Are there any members left in the members' room? Yes, Councillor Cole. Kathy's coming back in. Have I got missing? Councillor Purvis, she's coming back. Councillor Shea. Oh, we're all present. Wonderful. That's all right, don't worry. Right, now we are all seated. I'm going to ask Stephanie to outline the application of item 4.3, please.
Good evening, everyone. This application is an outline application for the demolition of 2 existing buildings, the creation of a development plot and the erection of 2 detached dwellings with all matters reserved at a property known as Perrin in Badgers Mount. This is the location plan. The site is identified in red. On the right-hand side of the screen is the location plan, which also depicts the other land owned by the applicant in blue, which goes around the property known as Perrin. To the left is just a slightly more zoomed out version of the location plan, just to give an idea of the wider area. These are drawings of the existing outbuildings to be demolished. As this is an outline planning application with all matters reserved, this is an indicative site plan giving us an idea of how the 2 dwellings could be located, along with access and parking. You can see the dotted outlines of buildings B1 and B2 to be demolished. This is a photo of the access looking north into the plot from Charles Road. This is a photo of the access, but the other way around. So I'm looking south back onto the Charles Road. This is a photo looking west into the rear garden of Perrin. This is a photo of the rear boundary of the site, and we're looking north. This is a photo looking toward the eastern boundary. Beyond this is the property known as Blue Haze. You can see to the left is a part of the building or a portion of the building that is to be demolished. This is a photo of the other outbuilding to be demolished. This is a photo along Charles Road looking northwest, and you can just see Perrin in the background there and the 2 accesses. This is a photo again taken from Charles Road, but looking northeast further down. This is leading towards the access for Blue Haze. And the full planning assessment and recommendations are set out in the committee papers and any late observations.
Super, thank you, Stephanie. Right, we now open the matter for speakers. And I think the first speaker is on Zoom, is that right?
Yes.
Yes, I have Mr. Hinton on Zoom. Kelvin, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kelvin Hinton, and I'm the agent for this application. As normal, the committee has a comprehensive report on the application, supplemented by the late observations document, which assesses all the relevant planning issues, including the planning policy considerations. Accordingly, I wish to make only a few points in the light of the referral of the application to this committee by Councillor Grint and his concerns in respect to Greenbelt impact and overdevelopment. First, in terms of Greenbelt policy, it's been established by previous applications that the site is within the settlement of Badgers Mount and comprises previously developed land as defined by national planning policy. The report before you concludes that the proposals are an appropriate form of redevelopment in Greenbelt policy terms, as substantial harm to openness would not be caused. Members will be aware that this policy is set out in para 154(g) of the NPPF. In addition and separately, the proposals are also an appropriate form of development in terms of grey belt policy as set out in paragraph 155 of the NPPF, with the relevant circumstances being met in this case. This assessment is confirmed by the late observation sheets produced by your officers. Therefore, and established by legal case law, since the proposals are appropriate development under two strands of NPPF policy, there is no need to consider any other impact on the Greenbelt. Secondly, in terms of possible overdevelopment, this is a phrase used in consideration of whether development is too large for the site it occupies. The application is made in outline with all details reserved, as was the previously approved application. In the case of both applications, however, illustrative details and floor spaces have been provided to show how development can be satisfactorily accommodated. The report you have before you assesses these issues and concludes that the proposals are acceptable given the site circumstances and the wider context. In this regard, it is important to note that the illustrative details for the current application continue to show the units in the central part of the site, with combined footprints and floor space being no greater and similar to that of the approved single dwelling. Also, and most importantly, it should be remembered that the council has full control over the size and scale of the development, as this is an outline application with all detailed matters reserved. If the details submitted in due course at reserved matters stage are considered to constitute an overdevelopment, the council can
Thank you very
retreat.
much, Mr. Hinton. That's time.
Thank you.
And I would now like to call upon the local member, Councillor Grint, to come and address us, please. And when you're ready, you have 4 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairman and committee members. I oppose this planning application and I ask you to refuse it. There is extant permission for development on this site. I beg your pardon. I ask you to refuse this planning application. There is extant permission for development on this site, so the issue here is not the principle of development, but the quantum of development. The site at Perron lies outside the urban confines of the hamlet of Badgers Mount. The site lies in the Green Belt and in the Kent Downs National Landscape. As such, it has the highest status of protection, and any proposed development must both conserve and enhance the landscape. Perron is situated on Charles Road. Charles Road is a narrow, single-lane track, a no-through road, with no passing points. The development site is currently the garden of Perron. There is, as I said, extant permission for a single dwelling on the site. It is my view and the view of Badgers Mount Parish Council that a single dwelling on the site is far more appropriate than the two dwellings proposed in the current application. I suggest to you that this is immediately apparent from looking at the site plan on the penultimate page of your papers, where you can see that Tanglewood, Perron, and a new single dwelling on the development site would all have near identical plot sizes. This is the character of the area. In paragraph 69 of the officer's report, the officer recognises this, but suggests looking further afield in Badger's Mount, where there are indeed some narrower plot sizes. I respectfully disagree with the planning officer. It's probably not apparent to the planning officer, but Charles Road is a particularly exclusive and secluded part of Badger's Mount, a haven where those who require or desire seclusion are able to live their lives away from the public gaze. Because of this, the character is indeed defined by the immediate neighbours. The proposal, therefore, represents overdevelopment of the site in a manner which fails to conserve, let alone enhance, the national landscape. The proposed development is harmful to the openness of the green belt. The planning inspector who allowed the extant permission stated that it would indeed be harmful to the openness of the green belt, although it fell short of causing substantial harm. This new proposal clearly causes additional harm, and the committee would be entitled to conclude that the cumulative harm to the green belt was indeed substantial. I therefore ask the committee to refuse this application on the grounds of harm to the green belt and harm to the national landscape. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there are no more speakers, so I open the case up for questions of the speakers for clarity, if there are any. There aren't. In which case, are there any questions of the officers? Yes, Councillor Camp.
Yes, thank you. From what I understand it, of course, this is just in principle, so absolutely everything will come back again for your approval or our approval. So am I right in understanding we're really just to decide if two as opposed to one that's already got permission?
Yeah, so there's an extant permission for just one on the site. That again was outline all matters reserved, and if that one had come back in at reserved matters, then that would have come in with the full suite of details, plans, elevations, any further supporting documentation that's required by any consultees. So this time round, it's the same thing, but it's just one extra dwelling that we're trying to consider. So they do have the permission for one, subject to a reserved matters, but here we're establishing whether the second one is going to be any more harmful than that extant permission.
Okay, so just to come back a tiny bit on that. So if, for example, in the reserved matters, if you get information and you decide that two dwellings, that they can't accommodate two dwellings, then that is the time when, if those matters weren't approved, it wouldn't go ahead with two.
No, we are setting a principle that two can go on here. It's
Okay.
the reserved matters will deal with what those two will look like. So at this
Okay.
point, it's two, but in what shape, form, and layout will come later.
Thank you.
Have Councillor Hogarth next.
Yes, could you clarify whether it's in the green belt or the urban envelope, and to explain what the difference would be if it's one or the other?
So it is within the green belt. It doesn't lie within the urban settlement of Badger's Mount. That is a little bit further up towards one of the sort of the northwest of it. So it does lie outside of it, hence why it's in the green belt. Yeah, so we've assessed it as such.
If there are no further questions of the officers, I open the matter for debate, taking account of the late observations as per your agenda papers. Who have I got first? Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's been a very sort of hypothetical evening.
Yes, it has.
Yeah. As this will be coming before us again, no doubt, I really don't see how we can reject it because we don't know what's going to happen. You know, yeah, but I think it's sensible to accept it and wait till it comes before us again.
Yeah. Is there anybody else for any more? No? In which, oh, yes, Councillor Malone.
Yeah, I hate to disagree with my learned colleague, but I do disagree with him, and on the basis of that not being, in my view, a good basis to approve this. You know, we're being asked to approve two buildings as opposed to the one that's currently got approval in principle, and you know, and if we give that approval, then 2 buildings is set in stone, or you know, subject, or you know, other building materials available. You know, with the sort of the detail to be discussed and you know potentially debated here if it isn't approved by officers under delegated authority. So I don't think the fact that we may get another chance to look at it is the basis on which we should you know, we should bless it. If we're happy with it, then I think we should bless it, and if we're not, then I think we shouldn't.
Yeah. Then there's no further debate. I will go back to opening it for, as per the agenda papers, taking account of the late observations. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. And are there any against? 3. The motion is carried, and that concludes our meeting at 6 minutes past 9. And thank you all very much for attending this evening, and we'll see you